Hi there, Aries. I'm EllaAradia, and welcome to your June 2026 Psychic Tarot reading. This reading is for my Aries fire signs, where we'll be exploring the overall energies and themes for the month ahead, as well as taking a deeper dive into how these might be playing out for you in your life. This is a general reading, so it's going to resonate a little bit differently for all of you. But what I do find is there's always a shared theme that runs through the collective of all of you Aries signs. So take what feels aligned to you and just leave the rest. And before we jump in, a big thank you to all of you who are supporting my channel by liking and subscribing. So if you enjoy this reading and you haven't already done that, please do. It helps the channel out a lot. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe, and then you can get notified when the next videos are up. So Aries, let's jump in. I always like to tune into the energies first, Aries, before I start pulling any cards. I'm a psychic reader, so I like to see what the universe shows me. I'm tuning into someone who is really out there trying to prove themselves, and it feels to me like there is a little inner child in the driving seat here who perhaps didn't feel, let's say, seen, acknowledged, understood, or loved in the way that they needed to. And what can happen sometimes with that is, you know, how then does that child get the love that they're wanting? And in this case, I'm feeling like it's, you know, over-giving, like over-investing, over-giving. If I just put enough work in, if I just stick at it long enough, then perhaps I'll be loved and acknowledged and appreciated, you know, for all of my efforts, for all of my hard work. And that is what I'm feeling going on here. But at the same time, you know, I feel like it's exhausting you and it's becoming something that you carry. And there is a big invitation here, I feel, this month around making a shift from, let's say, proving yourself to just showing up authentically. But the thing is, there will be most likely a fear around showing up authentically, being your true self, because if we follow that back to childhood, who you were was not enough. And so there's a fear of rejection or not being loved, accepted for who you truly are, you know, that authentic version of you. And so it's kind of keeping you in this pattern of, you know, over-investing, putting all this hard work in. And I feel for many of you, you're dealing with someone who's a little bit dismissive. Could be a boss in the workplace or somebody that you report to, something like that, who just almost doesn't even seem to be noticing, you know, the effort that you're putting in, the hard work. And for others, this is showing up in your relationship, you know, somebody who, again, just doesn't seem to be seeing or acknowledging, you know, how much you are kind of putting into this connection, how much you're pouring into them and supporting them. With your overall energies, we have the Five of Pentacles. This is very often a card of instability, of change, and sometimes it represents, you know, moving on or feeling like you have to move on from something. Sometimes it can represent feeling on the outside. It can be the abandonment card. But it also has, you know, wrapped up in it these lessons of, you know, self-worth and value and self-love. You know, when you look at the clothes that the figures are wearing in this card, you know, they're in tatters. And, you know, this is an energy where there is an invitation here to move forward in a different way, to move forward, you know, really knowing your worth and your value and really loving yourself. And of course, you know, sometimes we need that to be, you know, mirrored to us, you know, from somebody or something on the outside. But that's not the only way that we, you know, we find that worth and that value. You know, it's already inside of you. And ultimately, that is the invitation to really step in to your true authentic self here, rather than this energy of having to prove something in order to, you know, be loved and validated and all of those things that I mentioned. What lies in your recent past is the Magician. This is a card of potential, card of manifesting. And a little gentle reminder, especially with that Five of Pentacles there, that, you know, like the Magician has all the tools on the table that they need in order to manifest what they want, so do you. You already have inside of you everything that you need in order to move forwards and, you know, create here what you really want in life. And for those of you that this relates to love, you know, this may be someone that you're dealing with that you saw this potential. You saw what it could be. You saw what they could be. Your current energies, the Eight of Pentacles, putting the work in, investing it with a view to, you know, getting something back from that at some point. Now, for some of you, that might be learning a new skill. For those of you that this relates to career, putting the work in, you may be working towards perhaps climbing the ladder, getting a promotion, change of department, you know, something like that. Your feelings towards your situation, the Ten of Pentacles. So whatever this is, you know, you are building for the long term here, but I feel like there's a little bit of exhaustion. You know, Ten of Pentacles is about creating, you know, the life that you really want. You know, this is about building strong foundations that will really stand the test of time. This is often a card of legacy. You know, it's about building something, you know, that can potentially in the future, you know, be handed down to family. In a relationship, this represents, you know, two people making that commitment to each other with a view to the long term and really working on, you know, building those strong foundations with each other. And, you know, for those of you that this does relate to love, you know, that's what I see with these two cards. This is someone that you have down as your person, your life partner, and, you know, someone that you see your future with. You see the potential. In the challenge, we have the Ace of Swords. Often a card, you know, if it's in the challenge where, you know, there might be some truths that, you know, you might be avoiding facing, not seeing clearly. Because sometimes we can, you know, get very hooked in to the dream, the potential, especially in love, I feel more than anything else. I think love is like the number one thing that happens where, you know, we get more attached to the potential than the reality of what is, because, you know, this is an energy which comes in to cut through any illusions, to, you know, to bring the truth. But it's in the challenge position, which to me indicates perhaps there is a little bit of an inability to see the whole picture here. Because for those of you that this relates to love, I just feel like this is a very one-sided connection. And I feel within it, you're settling for less because you're putting all the work in. I feel like you're incredibly supportive and you really support your partner's needs, their dreams, their goals. You know, you've got them down for the long term. You've got them down as your life partner. And there is this dynamic going on where I just feel like, you know, that's not being reciprocated. That doesn't mean it can't change, but it might involve, you know, you making some adjustments in perhaps how you're showing up. Because right now, there is that inner child that I talked about at the beginning that's in the driving seat here, that if I do enough, maybe then I'll be loved. And so there is a fear here, I feel, to step back, let go, to put boundaries, to speak your truth, whatever it might be for you, a fear to lose that love. But like this, you know, will it really last? That's the question, because you don't really have that person anyway. Because, you know, a relationship that's really going to stand this test of time, you know, it does need to have a mutual commitment, and, you know, both parties need to be investing here. And it just feels like all their needs are being met and not really many of yours are. And that's something that needs to change. But first of all, you have to acknowledge those for yourself. And sometimes that can be the thing that we put aside as you know, as a child. You know, if I put my needs to one side, maybe I'll be loved. That's another thing that can happen. And of course, in terms of energy, it doesn't actually work like that. You know, when you love and you choose yourself and you pour into yourself, then that's your vibration, and then other people mirror that back to you, rather than what's happening now. So whatever is going on for you, there's always something to be learnt from it. And whatever the situation, it is always to question it. You know, what is this illuminating to me? What am I learning here? What is this a calling for me to perhaps step up to or step into? Because it's, you know, it's happening for a reason. We always have to bring it back to self. Whatever is going on, we always have to look at, you know, what is it in me that is creating this experience? Because, you know, the quicker you can learn the lessons, the more quickly those dynamics can start to change. Because what happens is we can obligate other people subconsciously, it's not a conscious thing, to show up in certain ways to help us learn what we're learning on a soul level. And unfortunately, a lot of the time we're learning these lessons in, you know, quite negative and dualistic ways. It just goes, you know, way back to kind of the beginning of time and ancient man. You know, that's where the roots of that is. And so, you know, these dynamics continue until you learn the lesson. We can't change other people. We can only really change ourselves. And the key to transformation is always about bringing it back to self and looking at, you know, what is my part to play in this? Now, for some of you, it may be something which you have invested a lot in. And it might be something that perhaps isn't really working out the way that you thought it would. Maybe it's not, you know, bringing in that abundance. And, you know, there is this moment where perhaps you're, you know, trying to work out, should you leave that behind? Should you cut your losses? And that might be the truth that the universe is really wanting you to see. But sometimes it's hard to do that when we have invested a lot of our time and energy into something. You know, perhaps it's a project you've been working on. And obviously, you know, moving forwards, you know, this isn't any kind of financial advice or anything like that. You know, always do what feels right for you. This is always just a guide. But sometimes, you know, it's harder to let go of things that we have invested a lot of time and energy into. And it may not be to let go of it, but it may be that there's some kind of adjustment that's needed here. Maybe you're meant to take a slightly different path or change something. So the hidden influence is the Two of Swords. So it definitely feels to me like there's something that's being avoided here, because the Two of Swords represents a little bit of a stalemate in terms of our mind, our thoughts. And with the blindfold, you know, that's the heart that's not being heard. And it feels like there's some kind of, you know, choice or decision here. Like for some of you, it might be about, you know, a career change. You're in a place where, you know, you're putting all this work in, but it's not bringing you what you really want. And you're dealing with somebody who I feel just feels a little bit dismissive, or they're just not acknowledging, you know, how much you're putting in. And all of that is there waiting for you, but you need to do that for yourself, I feel. You know, whether that is voicing something, you know, bringing it to someone's attention, or actually making a change. Because there's a big invitation for you to step into a new version of yourself this month, and, you know, a more authentic version of you with those soul lessons, you know, embodied, expressing yourself in that way. And doing it with confidence, you know, not being afraid to take up space. This is about getting yourself out there and being seen. And so there's a little something I feel that you've just got to work through in terms of those fears that I mentioned earlier. And tap into your heart. You know, whenever we feel blocked, it's about tapping into your heart, your intuition, and really listening, I feel, to what your heart has to say here. And really tuning in, you know, is there some fear? Is there something here, some kind of truth that, you know, let's say, you know, that you already know, but you're avoiding facing, because that is what you need to face in order to, I feel, make this next step forwards, to be able to make the right choice moving forwards, whether that's in love or career or whatever that is for you. Your advice from the universe, this is exactly what I was talking about. The Six of Wands, this is an energy of recognition, of, you know, being acknowledged, appreciated for your efforts, the work that you've been putting in. And sometimes that's about you doing that for yourself, taking a moment to sort of, you know, look at how far you've come, how much you've accomplished. This is the energy of, you know, someone getting attention. So, you know, yourself from others, and really being acknowledged. It's a card of success. And that is absolutely what you need to do in this situation. You need to take back your power and, you know, really work on that pattern from childhood, really have a deeper look at it and how, you know, it is actually kind of holding you back right now. And it doesn't mean, you know, that your present circumstances have to come to an end. It might be that once you shift yourself, you know, that creates an invitation for the person that you're dealing with to also shift. And so things can transform, you know, in your current position as well. But what does need to shift is your energy and how you're showing up in this. And in your outcome, I love that, the Chariot, some kind of call to action, you know, taking your power back and you being the one holding those reins, getting back in control of your life, keeping your focus, and just remembering that, you know, you have everything that you need to really navigate the ups and downs of life. That's what the energies of this card are all about. Some of you may even be moving for a job or career or something like that. But this is all about you getting back in the driving seat of your life here, Aries. So I'm going to leave that there. If this reading resonated, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And as always, no matter what comes through in a reading, moving forwards, always trust what feels right for you. So thanks so much for being here, and I wish you a great month ahead.